sudden, things aren't clicking right. So again, Jim Nanos from Apple Investigations and the PI coach based out here in New Jersey. I appreciate everyone taking some time out of their schedule to be with us today. And I hope you gain a little bit from the presentation. And I may forget to tell you at the end, but I'm always available on the telephone. You can call me anytime, any questions, or you want to discuss anything we talk about the PowerPoint offline or during the PowerPoint. I'll be more than glad to chat with you. So we're going to talk about tax regulations for 2026. So I want everyone to know this is I guess everyone panicked there, right? So no, we're not talking about tax regulations. So what I'm going to do today is I want to go over what I call developing a believable cover story when conducting some sort of a surveillance operation. For those of us who are out there doing surveillance, every day, there's going to come instances where maybe you're going to have to hide in plain sight, or you could possibly be challenged by a neighbor or someone walking down the street. And there's some things I want you to take into consideration. A little bit of work you can do ahead of time that'll help you tremendously when it comes time to do those in the field surveillances. So one thing I'd like to do, I want to issue a warning first, and that warning is I am the mayor of Realville, USA. So I'm going to tell you what I think, what works for me. It may not work for you, but I'm going to give you my honest opinion. I don't like to sugarcoat things and put things into scenarios that don't work or never going to happen in the real world. Everything I do regarded to either the PI coach or when I do these webinars or instructions are based upon real world experience that I've had or folks I've worked with have related to me. So these are instances and situations that you're going to encounter actually out on the street. So although there might be a hypothetical here and there, for the most part, everything is reality based. Like I said, I love to say I live in Realville because that's just the way it is. So with that being said, a little bit more of a warning here. Please, if anybody's out there and does any presentations, you know that there's always going to be self-promotion. So I give you a warning that there's going to be intense self-promotion to follow in the next two slides. I call those the I love myself slides, but we have to get them out there to show you that I'm qualified and that I am a credible instructor. So the intense self-promotional disclaimers, this is a warning used to alert attendees that the following content may contain disturbing self-promotion. This is done to give individuals the opportunity to avoid the content if they're sensitive to such materials. My first words of wisdom, and I want you to remember this always, is you're operating a for-profit business. You're out there to make money. This isn't a hobby. I know some hobbyists out there, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I run my business to make a profit, and you have to approach your PI business as a profit or for-profit business. Please don't go out there and do things for free. Yes, we all like to do pro bono stuff from time to time, but remember, you're going to have to keep the lights on. You're going to have to pay your bills. So always remember, this is a for-profit business. So with that being said, a little bit about myself. And again, these are the I love myself slides. I'm a retired detective sergeant from the Wildwood Police Department. I worked there for about 28 years. Did a lot of narcotics, a lot of undercover stuff. At the same time, concurrently, I was a member of the U.S. Coast Guard assigned to what we call Coast Guard Investigative Services. If you're a Navy vet, you call it NCIS. You have your version. Army is CID. Air Force is OSI. I'm not sure what Space Force calls themselves, but I was a special agent handling counterterrorism, narcotics investigations for the Coast Guard. No uniform. I wore a suit and tie, one of those guys. Just like, although it's not like the TV show, it was similar to the TV show. 3 real world deployments post 9/11. I ended up doing 6 months at Ground Zero on the 12th. Got there day after 9/11 attack. Spent 6 months on the pile there. Came back home to the police department. Then I was deployed 6 additional months down in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, with detainee ops, and then finally 6 months overseas during Operation Iraqi Freedom. So the moral of that is join the Coast Guard, see the world. A friend of mine was a Marine and he never left Newark, New Jersey. So you never know what you're going to get when you sign up for things. I'm the owner of Apple Investigations and the PI Coach, as well as my new equipment business, Spy Gear Pro. If you have any need for any covert surveillance equipment, feel free to give me a call. I'm not going to talk you into buying a piece of equipment. I'm going to help you decide what piece of equipment is best for you. And if what piece of equipment is best for you is something I don't sell, I'll recommend where you go to get it. It's important to me that you get the right piece of equipment, not just me make a sale. Former owner of PI Magazine and PI Gear. Thankfully, that's all in the rearview mirror for me. I'm an associate editor for Working PI Magazine. That's the other magazine that's out there. I encourage everyone to go to workingpimagazine.com. It's a free magazine. We publish 4 times a year. It's a great publication. Doesn't cost you a dime. Hopefully, I'll have the new podcast up and running shortly. That's going to be called the PI Coach Podcast. It'll also have a video component that'll be on YouTube. So you'll be able to see my lovely face on YouTube, or listen to the podcast on the traditional podcast platform. I speak at conferences, national and state conferences all the time. I'm the president of the New Jersey Association of Licensed Private Investigators, and God knows how many other associations have been. Sometimes you lose count of them. Past president of Fraternal Order of Police. I also do small engine repair and taxidermy. I'm only kidding about the taxidermy part. So with that being said, a couple other real quick points. Just want to show you. That's me as a Hasidic Jew. That's me working undercover. There's me as a Huggy Bear, in the Coast Guard. And just for those who may think, before Snoop Dogg was dressing like Snoop Dogg, I dressed like Snoop Dogg. So with the I love me stuff gone, let's get into the meat and potatoes of what we're going to be talking today, and that's the developing a believable cover story when conducting surveillance ops. So a lot of times what I have found is sometimes when people confront and come up and talk to you, you've got to have something in the can, what you're going to say when that person comes up and knocks on the window. What are you going to say to them? So let's chat about that. What do you do when a covert surveillance becomes an overt surveillance and may require a believable cover story? What story should I use? So we've all had those situations where we're sitting in a car doing a surveillance, and all of a sudden it's not covert anymore. People know you're out there. It's overt. They start, seeing the strange car in the neighborhood, seeing you scrunched down in the front seat. And next thing you know, the little old lady with blue hair, who I call the block captain, she might be coming up tapping on a window, or they're going to call the police. Hopefully you've done a deconfliction and the cops know you're out there. That's a whole nother block I do that I'd love to do sometime for you. I'm a big proponent of deconfliction. But what should you do? So let's talk about a scenario first, okay? So here's the first scenario. In all likelihood, you're out doing your surveillance, and this is the typical 4 or 8 hour surveillance. You're out there doing your workers' comp thing or your matrimonial surveillance or whatever it is that you're doing. In all likelihood, you're seated in your car alone. Excuse me, you're probably out there for an extended period of time. Does that start to sound questionable? You're sitting in a neighborhood in a car by yourself with the windows up or slight cracked slightly, and people are going to start eyeballing you. I've had tons of surveillances on the cul-de-sacs, or, you get to that neighborhood and everybody parks in their driveway and you're the only guy in a car sitting out on the street, or you're the only place you can park is like, my God, I'm almost in that person's living room. I'm right in front of their house, and all their houses are built, right up to the street. What do? You got to have a story. So some of the cases that you're going to come across: child custody, workers' comp, the occasional matrimonial case. Typically what we do when we're doing surveillance, you're probably in your car for 4 hours or more doing that stationary surveillance, not moving around. You got to park the car, usually get there 6 o'clock in the morning. You're there. People are out, coming out, going to work, coming out, taking their kids to school. Kids may be waiting for the bus. And all of a sudden there's some guy sitting in a car, some weirdo sitting in a car in a neighborhood that nobody knows. A lot of times you're going to find yourself in a densely populated neighborhood, even if it's not densely populated. Think about the rural surveillance. Sometimes they're harder to do than the urban surveillances. I mean, how often can you park on the side of the road with your hood up or change your flat tire before people start, making phone calls, or you're no longer covert. Now you're overt. We spoke about a lot of times you're going to have houses that are close together. There's no covert parking available, heavy neighborhood activity. I find that really, really difficult to deal with in the morning, early surveillances. I'm not so worried about people coming out, getting in their cars, going to work. A lot of times those people are in the zone. They're coming out with a cup of coffee or their mug or their bag. They're getting in the car and off they go. They're already thinking about work. What I find is the bigger problem is when you're sitting in your car by yourself, all scrunched down, and all of a sudden the kids are on the corner waiting for the bus. And, you start to feel, well, hey, if this was my neighborhood and I saw some guy in a car and there were kids out there waiting to get on a bus, I'd start asking questions. I find that being the bigger problem than the people coming out to go to work. Come out to go to work, they're in the car, they're gone. So the kids are the problem, at least as I find it. And we all know, we've all run into the block captain. Again, like I said, the lady with the blue hair who knows everybody's business. And I say generically lady, but I've had as many guys as ladies. They know everybody's business. They know everybody's car. I've been to neighborhoods where the block captain, the lady on the block, who's usually the oldest or longest resident, actually assigns parking on the block. And I've had them come up to me and say, I don't know what you're doing here, but that's not your parking spot. Even though there's not labeled, everyone has their assigned parking spot. So you're going to run into those kind of people. And the question is, what do you do when that neighbor approaches your car? What's your story? So when I do this in a live setting, I usually ask the class, and we won't do it today because we're pressed for time, and it's just not the right situation to start asking people to chime in with questions. But when I ask in a classroom setting, I'll say, raise your hand and tell me what is your story when somebody comes up and knocks on the window and says, "Can I help you?" or "What are you doing here?" or "Who are you?" What do you say to them? So you have some options, and these are actually the responses I'm going to show in the next slide are actually responses that people have told me at classes. When I say people, I mean our colleagues, other private investigators. These are the actual cover stories that people will tell someone. Now, keep this in mind. They're willing to tell me this in a classroom setting in front of their peers. Imagine the stuff that they're not telling me. So, here's some of the responses I've got. Somebody comes up knocking on a window, they just drive away. You just get in you start the car up and you drive away. Probably not the best alternative, not the best solution to somebody knocking on your car. I've had investigators tell me I just ignore the person knocking on the window. I just sit there, keep my eyes forward like they're not even there. Well, how do you think that's going to end? That's going to end with a cell phone being whipped out, pictures being taken, 911, and the cops are going to come. So, you just can't ignore someone coming up knocking on the window. I've had investigators tell me they act like they're asleep, just as bad. They tilt their head back, they act like they're asleep when someone's pounding on the window. Again, probably not a good solution. I've had office or investigators tell them that they're the police. Now, that's a rabbit hole we can go down, but I know in my state, in New Jersey, if I tell someone I'm a police officer, that's a what we would call a disorderly persons offense. Most states would call it a misdemeanor at the least. At the least, it's some sort of violation of some sort of law, and you're potentially going to get yourself in trouble. We already have enough problems when you tell somebody I'm a private investigator because you're saying I'm a private investigator and they're hearing I'm a police officer. And we've had lots of times where people swear I've told them I'm a police officer, and I've had it, recording because I'm recording on my cell phone or on a recording device, and it's clear that I said I'm a private investigator, but they've heard I'm a police officer. But I've had investigators tell me I tell them I'm the cops. Not in any way, shape, or form a good response when somebody knocks on your window or your door. I've had investigators tell me, I tell them, it's none of your business who I am. Now beat it. And again, that it sounds funny, but remember these are actual real responses that people have given to people that are coming up and knocking on their doors or their windows when they're doing surveillance. Another one I've heard in the past is I tell them, hey, I'm looking for my lost dog. If that doesn't sound kind of creepy, if that doesn't sound a little pedophile-ish or something, if that's even such a word, I'm looking for my lost dog just doesn't cut it. A guy by himself sitting in a car for 4 hours looking for my lost dog, I don't think so. I've had folks tell other folks, "Hey, my car's broken down," and they'll say, "Well, why haven't you called AAA? Why haven't you called a tow truck? Why are you sitting in the car with the windows up?" All kinds of responses, and it just again, you'll start going down a rabbit hole with someone knocking on the window that you have no idea how to answer that person. You're just going to get yourself in more and more trouble. More your activity is going to be scrutinized even more questions, and ultimately somebody's going to call the police on you, which is not going to go or do well or bode well for whatever it is that you're trying to do. I've had investigators say, I'm lost. Can you help? I've been sitting here for 4 hours. I don't know where I'm going. Well, who gets lost in today's world? I mean, everyone's got GPS on their phone or in their car. I mean, the days of getting lost or at least sitting for 4 hours while you're waiting for directions, just they don't exist. So the question is, what's your story? You've got to have this planned out ahead of time. You can't just wait for this all to go down and try to develop a story on the fly. You should have your shtick. You should have your story worked out ahead of time. It's got to be believable. It has to be reasonable. And you're going to have to be able to explain what you're doing to somebody, and they're going to have to believe you. Think about it in the days when I used to go out and buy drugs, undercover. I mean, the hardest part was trying to convince somebody that they should sell you drugs. sell you some cocaine or some crack or some heroin, whatever the drug du jour was at the time. It's not just easy to walk up and say, "Hey, sell me drugs." You got to convince somebody that you're something that you're obviously not. Some people are really good at it, and the folks that probably worked undercover narcotics are going to be really good at BSing or bullshitting their way through that knock on the window. But the time to think about this is not when someone's knocking on your window, because believe me, whatever you say will not be believable. So my answer is it's none of those above. None of the above that we just went through. I would ever, I should never say ever or never say never, but I should say I would probably never use any of those ruses or those explanations in any surveillance I've done. What you need to do is you need to have that pre-developed, believable, and the emphasis is on believable cover story, and you got to have it preemptively set and ready to go. When somebody comes up and knocks on that window and says, "What are you doing here?" That's not the time to start thinking and rolling the eyes. Yeah, what am I doing here? What am I going to tell this lady? I've had a lot of situations where the target of my investigation comes up and knocks on the window. What do you do then? This is all things you've got to think about ahead of time. What am I going to say that's going to be believable? So, first thing, what's needed when you develop your cover story. And we're going to get into what my cover story is. I'll show you that's a little bit later in the presentation. But before we get there, we have to think about some things ahead of time. So as you're developing your cover story, and you should be doing this over the next, week to 2 weeks, coming up with your story. And I'll give you what I use, and you can take a variation of what I use. I've been very successful with it over the years. And it's not rocket science. I'm no genius. I'm just a PI like everybody else on this call. But it works for me. May not work for you. I mean, you're probably going to have situations and audiences and areas that maybe this wouldn't work for you. Well, in that's the case, give me a call and tell me what works for you, and I'll work it into future presentations so everybody else can benefit from it. But what we need to do first, do your pre-surveillance homework. And when I say pre-surveillance homework, not to get off on a tangent or go down a separate rabbit hole, but you know, uh, you should not get a surveillance, book a surveillance a week in advance, and I'll wait till I get out there at 6 o'clock in the morning and I'll see what the neighborhood looks like, or something like that. At the very minimum, I go through Google Earth. On the best case scenario, I'll take a ride by that neighborhood, and I'll go by the same time I plan on starting my surveillance. So if I'm going to start my surveillance at 6 a.m., I'll do a drive by at 6 a.m. to see what the neighborhood looks like. I want to see, maybe at 3 o'clock, there's plenty of parking spots, but at 6 o'clock in the morning, there's no place to park. And I'm going to have to park someplace maybe I don't want to park. You need to know that front loaded before you go in. And again, that's going to help you with your cover story. Dress appropriately, in vehicle included. Part of your cover story is, how you're dressed in the vehicle you're operating. Again, I'll draw the, buying drugs and undercover analogy. I love to do that. You can't show up to buy street level crack cocaine with a suit and tie. Well, you could, but most people aren't dressed that way. Dress appropriately for the neighborhood. Have the appropriate vehicle. If you're in a neighborhood that has high end cars, you can't show up with the old Taurus and not expect to stand out. If you're in that neighborhood where everybody's parking, off the street in garages, excuse me, or in their driveways, you're going to have to take that into consideration. That includes developing your cover story. I like to use, or always use, the preemptive approach. If I see somebody eyeballing me, if I see that person, coming out like they look, they're supposed to be like watering the lawn, but they're really looking at you, kind of thing. They're trying to play the game. I'll get out and approach that person. I won't wait till they come and knock on my window, and I'll utilize my cover story that we're going to go over. I'll preemptively approach that person and identify myself and speak to them. I don't necessarily always wait for someone to come up and knock on a window. A lot of times you'll know that someone's looking at you. We all know when we've been made. Okay. So when you're made, you need to preemptively and proactively address that, not wait until they call the police on you. Because that's when, the jig's up, and that's when you got a problem. The surveillance is either blown, or you're going to have to move, or you're going to have to come back another day. None of that's going to work well for you, because it's always harder to come back than just do it the first time. You should always have your identification and your business cards ready. I know some PIs, when I go over this in the PI coach and my mentoring business, they'll say, well, I just keep my business cards and my ID right in my console in my car. Not my business model. That's not what I do because I switch cars a lot of time. I've got two different cars I use plus a bucket truck for my camera work that I do. So I never know what I'm driving. So, but I will tell you this, no matter what I do, whether I'm going down to get groceries today or I'm going out to do a surveillance or I'm just going over to see one of my kids at their house, I do not walk outside of my house without my computer bag with my laptop or what I call my camera bag, and that's my surveillance bag. That's all my, I have the same bag with all my equipment I take on every job. So I know where everything is. I always have the same equipment. And inside that camera bag, because I always have it, I keep my ID. I always have my camera bag with me. I don't know what vehicle I'm going to have. So it's just too much to try to remember. And it's very hard when you try to approach somebody and you say, I'm a private investigator, I'm working a case. And they say, oh, let me see your identification. You're like, I don't have any identification. I left it in the other car. Why don't you just say my dog ate it? Okay, so have your identification available. Always keep it in the same spot. Have your business cards. And just on a tangent, on a side note, I strongly recommend if you guys have badges, get rid of the badges. Everybody who's ever worked for me, they do not have a badge in their identification because that's how people mistake you for a police officer. I've got my teeny weeny badge in my wallet. If anybody ever questions my status as a retired law enforcement because I am carrying a weapon, I've got that in my wallet. But in my PI wallet identification, my ID thing, my badge, I do not carry a badge because that will get you in trouble. Going back to what we started with, you're going to say, "Hi, I'm a private investigator." They're going to hear, "I'm a police officer." So just don't. I recommend not even carrying a badge. It's just a recipe for disaster. So I don't know why we got down that rabbit hole, but we did. Please don't display the cop attitude. We all know what the cop attitude is. I'm a retired law enforcement officer, so I get to say that. We all know people that still have that cop attitude. I retired in 2010. I know people that retired with me that you'd still think they're out fighting the war. I mean, it's they've got that attitude to everything they do, and it does not bode well in our business. You cannot have that law enforcement type attitude and expect to be successful in this business. You got to be humble. You got to be respectful. Not that you're not when you're a police officer, but we probably all know, the Tackleberry kind of guy, dating myself, they were movies, but we all know that guy or that girl. So don't have that attitude. Be a little passive. When you're dealing with people, it's always better to come off, and I find this even good when I'm doing interviews. It's always much better to come off with the, hey, I could really use your help in this. I just don't understand everything about this case, than coming off again with that cop attitude. People instinctively want to help people, and that's going to tie right into, you'll see how this ties into my cover story, but people want to help people. They don't want to help people with attitudes. So if you come off with the attitude, you're probably going to be met with an attitude. If you come off with that little bit of passive, hey, I'm just looking for some help here, I just don't understand, whatever your shtick is, you're probably going to get more success that way. Know your story, your cover story inside out. You've got to know it inside out. When you develop your cover story, what I recommend you do, and I have done this, I've went to every single neighbor in my neighborhood and say, and they all know I'm a PI, and they all, they all watch television and they all think I'm out doing secret squirrel stuff all the time. I've said, here's how you can help me. I'm going to run my cover story by you. I want you to speak to me like this is a real world situation. The reason I want you to do that is you're going to get real world questions and responses to what you're saying. Make sure you have an answer for what that person is going to ask of you. So have an answer, but remember, always build in some vagueness. Vagueness is that little bit, I can take this left or right, up or down if I need to. If you know all the facts, 100% of the facts, that sounds it starts to sound a little fishy. I purposely build some vagueness into my cover story because that gives me an out. If somebody asks me a question that I don't have an answer for, I have that vagueness built in that it's acceptable why maybe I don't know the answer to the question that they just asked. Very important that you have your props ready. Now, when I say props, you're going to see when I go over the next slide what my cover story is. You'll see what my props are. You're going to see when I say flyers, you're going to see what my flyer is that I carry with me. Have your cell phone, and I'll explain why you should have your cell phone. And I know nobody can answer this because I'm not doing a live Q&A at this point, but if you say something to somebody, whatever your story is, I guarantee you they're going to whip out their phone and they're going to go Google you, or they're going to Google what you tell them. And today's Google is, 40, 30 years ago, Yellow Pages. For those of us that are old enough to remember the Yellow Pages, when somebody when I was a kid growing up, or when I first started as a police officer, when somebody said, I own a business, the go-to was pull out the yellow pages. And if they're in the yellow pages, they're legitimate. And if they have a bigger ad in the yellow pages, then they're really legitimate. In today's world, they got to have a website. You got to have a website, you got to have Facebook, you have Instagram, you got to have all that stuff. So you're going to have to build your backstory. Excuse me. You're going to have to build your backstory with your story, because people are going to challenge at least one level or one degree of what your story is. And I'll show you how I've addressed that. So here's my cover story. And we're going to go over both of these independently, separately, but you should have, hopefully you have two separate images on the screen. The one on the left should be the missing person. That's a flyer or a poster. The one on the right is a screenshot from a website. Now, my plan was to take you to the live website today, findjessica.com. But as I told you, Investigator Murphy showed up yesterday, and I'd asked my web developer, someone who helps me out, to make some changes for today's presentation. And unfortunately, the whole website's down. So I have to show you screenshots of the website, which is just as well. But you'll be able to go to that website live in the future, maybe after tonight when she gets it back up, and you'll be able to see live. But so on the left is a flyer that I produce. Now this one is the dated one, because again, I had to use something from my file instead of live. And the one on the right is a website. So let's break those two down. So here is my flyer. So this is a flyer that I print out and I produce, and I keep them with me in all of my vehicles. This is my cover story. So when someone comes up and knocks on my window, or I see somebody eyeballing me, I will either approach them, or this is when they say, what are you doing? I don't tell them I'm the milkman, I'm looking for my dog, or none of that other BS. I tell them, hey, I'm a private investigator. I'm working a missing person case. And my story is, hey, I'm a subcontractor working for a missing person case out of Pennsylvania. I'm working for another private investigator. Somebody called the hotline, or maybe it was a website. I'm not too sure, because this isn't my case. I'm actually helping out another investigator. They called the website and they said that they apparently reported they saw Jessica in the neighborhood on a bicycle. And I've been detailed here for a couple of days just to see if Jessica, goes by the neighborhood, or if she's by the neighborhood or riding through the neighborhood. So you got to have a flyer. So I whip out the flyer and I hand them the flyer, and they're going to read the flyer as I'm telling them this story. So as you can see on that, the name Jessica Jesse Anderson is my fictional missing person. Some suggestions when you're developing this is always use a female name. My experience and my research has shown that people are much more apt to help you look for a female who is in trouble than a male that's in trouble. So always use a female's name. Use common acceptable names. I've picked Jessica with the nickname Jesse Anderson. Seems like it works. There is no real Jessica Jesse Anderson. I'll explain to you in a moment who that person is on the left there. I'm sorry, I got a little bit of a frog going on here, so I got to drink some water. So always use a common name. Try not to get too ethical or ethic in names. Keep something that's just very generic, because that way it'll fit in any neighborhood or any situation. Just a generic common name. Here's some suggestions of names you stay away from, okay? You shouldn't be looking for Trixie. You shouldn't be looking for Bruno. Please don't look for Summer, Cinnamon, no Jockos, and no Little Sluggos. So don't use crazy names. I've had PI say, well, I'll say it's a female exotic dancer named Trixie. No, it's not going to work. Okay, just use a common name. And never, ever, ever, and we'll talk about who this is on the left here, never use pictures from Google Images of real people without their express permission. Just on a quick side note, just because an image, whether it's a person, whether it's a piece of equipment, whether it's an image, just because it's on Google Images does not mean it's out there in the public domain to serve or to use, I should say. Just on a quick side note, I'm from extreme southern New Jersey. We have an area called Cape May down here, which is very nice. It actually is a nice part of New Jersey. Most people don't realize that. But there's a very nice, beautiful beach down here. It has incredible sunsets. And there was a great big lifeguard boat on it. And somebody took a picture with the word Cape May on the side of the lifeboat and the sunset in the back. And this person is an attorney. And he puts that picture up on Google Images. And everybody in this area who has a website would take that image and put it on their website. He would immediately send you a cease and desist letter and then file a lawsuit against you for $50,000 and basically shake them down for 5 grand. I know this because unfortunately in the early on, I was serving summonses for lawsuits for this guy until I really took a chance and read them. So just again, going down a little rabbit hole there, do not just grab an image off Google Images because you'll get yourself in trouble. So we'll talk about who this person is. So I usually ask people at this time, who do you think that person is? And I get, oh, it's your daughter, it's your wife, it's neither one of those. This is a model that I had hired. I found a modeling school in my area. I went there and, as a private investigator, introduced myself to the person running the modeling agency and said, here's what I'm looking to do. I need to develop a missing person website. I'd like to hire a model to pose for some pictures for me. And I'm going to put them on and I gave her the whole shtick. And I found this young lady, her real name is Jessica. It's not Anderson's, not correct, but that is her real name. And she agreed. I think I paid her back then $150. And the deal was she was going to give me 6 or 7 photographs. And this young lady got into this so much, she was sending me pictures for years. And what she would do is every time she would go somewhere, she would pose in front of, she went to Paris. She's got pictures of her in front of the Eiffel Tower. She went to the Grand Canyon. She's got pictures of her at the Grand Canyon. She would just keep sending them to me for free. And I would occasionally work them into the website, or I'd have them on my cell phone available to show somebody. So this young lady was a godsend to me, and she's really helped me out. So I would recommend not using your children because you're probably going to hand out this flyer, so you don't know where it's going to go. I'd recommend not, or definitely don't use pictures of anybody on the website or grabbing photographs, no celebrities, nothing like that. You've got to figure out a way to use a model or a real person. What you can do now, and now we're much more advanced than when I developed this a few years ago. If anybody uses Chat GPT, you can hop right on Chat GPT and just say, develop me a picture of, and give them, a white female, Caucasian female, approximate age 25, shoulder length brown hair, smiling. I want the background to be a backyard. And within a couple minutes, Chat GPT will produce you an image that you can use because it's a totally fictional person. So that's how I recommend people get images now, rather than go out and try to hire somebody. Just get on Chat GPT and let the machine produce your picture. Make sure you get a number of pictures, and I'll show you why you're going to need a number of pictures in a little while. So let's go moving on a little bit. So Jesse Anderson, we talked about, never use pictures from Google Images or real pictures. These are some other pictures she has sent me over the years, Halloween, different places. And they all work because I'll show you, I have a file on my phone where I put all Jessica's pictures in there. And as I'm talking to somebody, telling them, hey, I'm working a missing person case, blah, 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 I can take out my phone and scroll through and show additional pictures of who Jessica is. So now what you have is, you've got me telling them what I'm doing. I've displayed my ID. I give them my real business card. I give them a flyer, and I'm showing them pictures on my phone. That is a complete backstory. And I prominently post the website so they can whip out their phone and go right to it on their phone and see that it's a real website. It all meshes and works together, and that will probably end the questions that you'll have. But it's a believable story. Now, how I make it more believable is if you, well, let's do it this way. I'll go to another slide here. So hopefully you'll be able to follow along with me. So my flyer is in the upper left-hand corner, and this is the text that is inside or contained in the flyer. So in the black writing, this is the backstory, and this is basically what I tell the folks. The description: Jesse's a Caucasian female, age 32. At the time of her disappearance, she's 5'6", 130 pounds. I always say her hair looks dark in the photographs, but it's much lighter now. I believe it's much lighter. And again, what's that mean? It's just bullshit that you throw in there, and it sort of makes it sound a little bit more believable. Hers light brown, shoulder length hair at the time of her disappearance. Then I go into a little bit more. Jessica went missing from the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. Why do I say Pittsburgh? Because I'm from Southern New Jersey. Now I'm starting to build in the vagueness. It's not my case. So that's how I can explain not having the answers to everything, because it's not my case. She's missing from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm the local PI that the family and their PI retained because they got a phone call saying Jessica was seen in this neighborhood. So that's how I start to build in my vagueness. It's not my case. Her disappearance from Pittsburgh Pennsylvania in January. Now my flyers say, January of 2025. Jesse was a little distraught over a death of a close friend. Her disappearance is not considered suspicious. So I always put that out there. I say, look, the family, she wasn't kidnapped or anything like that. They just think that she needs some time away and they're concerned about her. And you'll see why a little bit further along. But they're a little concerned about her well being, but it's nothing suspicious because you don't want those people to call the cops and say, hey, there's some guy here talking about some girl who was kidnapped. Because again, that starts to sound a little fishy and maybe taken the wrong way. Remember how you say one thing, but the person hears something different. So I make it very, very clear that she was not kidnapped and she was not abducted. She left on her own free will. Family is very concerned over her mental health. Jesse's been known to visit and enjoy the Jersey Shore, New England, and Southern Florida areas. The reason I put that in there is obviously I'm at the Jersey Shore. I've got a friend of mine who uses this story up in New England, and I've got another friend who's down in Florida who uses my story, and they use my flyers. So that way they can explain why she's missing from Pittsburgh. So why are you down here in Boca looking for her? Well, because somebody reported that they saw her riding a bicycle. I prominently put my business phone number right underneath the website on the bottom of that. You'd be surprised how many times I go out and do a surveillance. I hand out flyers, and it's all bullshit. None of this is real. And 2, 3 days later, somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, you were here last Tuesday. I think I saw Jessica. I saw her riding a bicycle." People are going to be telling you they see this woman. So have your story down, what you're going to say. So that's what the flyer says. Now, I encourage those people. Hey, go to the website. And there's the websites on the right. Let's jump into that. So it's a very, very, very basic website. Nothing over the top. It's as basic as you can make it. And that's the whole idea. I say, look, the family has a little bit of money. They're concerned. They hired a local private investigator in Pittsburgh who's been handling the reports and the sightings. Jessica, somebody said they saw Jessica here in this part of New Jersey. So they retained me to come out here and do 4 or 8 hours of surveillance. So I'm just sitting here seeing if this girl rides through the neighborhood. Here's the flyer. Have you seen this girl? We're really concerned about her. Everyone wants to help you at that point. I've had folks that come out and at that point say, hey, look, if you need to use the bathroom, you can come in and use my bathroom. I had one lady bring me out iced tea sitting in the car, offer me lunch because everybody wants to help find Jessica. So it'll work to your benefit. And I always tell them, say, look, because you never know who is, most neighbors, I know my neighborhood, for example, we've got a text string for everybody in my neighborhood. All the neighbors have a text string. So that block captain's going to hop on the cell phone and put out a text. Hey, odd looking car sitting in front of my house, but she might be putting out, hey, he's looking for a missing person. Here's the website. It's a believable story. So now they don't think, well, it's a matrimonial or workers' comp case. Hey, it's somebody looking for a missing person. So that is what the website basically looks like. I'm going to tell you, bring this up. These are the photographs down the bottom, and I'll explain to you why I did them this way. They were deliberately placed in this order, and these were very specific photographs. I'm hoping, let me see if you can see these. Yes. Okay. Next slide. So I put them in a very specific order. I'm sure you're all aware, whenever you pick up a document and you start to read, we read how? Left to right. We don't read right to left. We read left to right. So if you look at the first photograph on the left, Jessica's, very happy, a little risque. She's got a little skimpy top on there, big smile. Moving to the right, next little selfie, moving a little right, a little different. Her hair's up. Next one to the right, she's, you can probably just see the little solo cup on the right. That was done intentionally. A little bit of a college vibe to it, like a frat or a sorority house. Oh, she's drinking. I tell people, the family don't want it out, but Jessica's got a little substance abuse problem. There's some prescribed medication, and she sometimes when she drinks a little bit, she gets a little disoriented. The picture is consistent with that. Now moving to the next one, see how her face is. She's a little bit more serious, a little bit distraught. And then the final photograph looks like kind of dark, like Jessie is sort of like in a dark place. So basically my pictures cover happy Jessie all the way down to missing Jessica. And that was intentionally done that way. And I asked Jessie, who took the photographs, here's what I'm looking for. And she did a fabulous job of developing the photographs of herself different hairstyles, different clothing, different backgrounds, different exposures. Pictures can't all look the same. She did a tremendous job at this. I mean, this girl was so into it. She made this developing this story very, very easy. So let's hop over to the website. When you pull up findjessica.com, this is the website that'll pop up. I don't know if you can. I was hoping you could see that. I don't think you can. But the story there is, gives you a little bit of what's on the flyer there, and it has the photographs. And if you were to scroll down, it's got the phone number for you to call. It was purposely built to display this way on a cell phone. Most people, when they Google you, they're going to whip out the cell phone. They're going to go right on their cell phone. So when you develop your cover website, most developers will develop the website for a desktop and then do a cell phone version or mobile version based upon the desktop. I had mine done the other way around because I think the majority of people in my cover story are probably going to be looking at the mobile version, not necessarily the desktop. So you want it to appear the way you want it to appear on your cell phone. And that doesn't always happen when you take a desktop website and open it up on a mobile device. Sometimes it comes off a little bit different. I want them to get the information as I want them to get it in the order that I want to get it so that it matches my cover story, my line of bullshit. So I always get people ask, hey, what's this going to cost me? And I don't do this. So I'm not selling you a service here. I don't say, hey, call me and I'll develop your website. I will do that. But I that's not why I'm speaking with you guys today. Pardon me. So what's it going to cost me? So it's going to cost you website hosting. So I use HostZinger. You can use anybody you want. I'd strongly recommend when you develop your website, though, if you're going to use GoDaddy or HostGator or anybody, do not use their website builder if you can help it, because then you're stuck with, you always have to keep the website there. You can't like save it and take it someplace else. So if you have the ability or the expertise, or you have a guy or a 12-year-old neighbor, get them to develop it in WordPress so that you can take that website with you. I developed my first website on GoDaddy. I did it myself. When I switched over to HostZinger, I realized that their website builder is proprietary and you can't take their website and take it someplace else. Maybe there's tools that allow you to do it, but it just wasn't worth, it was too much hassle for me. So just build your website in WordPress. You'll be fine. What's that going to cost me? Your domain name, which in my case is findjessica.com, that runs me a whopping $9.99 a year to host that website. I think that's probably something that's within most of our reach financially. To host the actual site runs me, I think I'm around right in the middle of that. I think I'm at $5.99 a month. So you're looking at roughly $6 a month. So right now I'm into, if you take the $9.99 and you divide that by 12 and then, divide your $5.99 by 12, you're probably into this for about $7 a month average right now. Most time you host a website, it'll include, a free email. I don't necessarily put an email on the website because that's just going to, if somebody emails you something, if they've seen Jessica and you don't respond to it, it might cause problems. So I'd rather them call me because I can screen a call where I can quickly say, hey, thanks for calling, but Jesse's home. And I can end it right there. I don't have to worry about, well, somebody's emailing me and I used this story 5 times in the last 2 weeks. Where is this? Because it's just too much. Go for the phone call instead of the email if you can. Again, I said you can build your own website. It's a really basic website. So I would suggest you build your own. That goes along with, maybe not having that $1,000 or $500 website for a missing person. Keep it simple, stupid. It'll work out really well for you in the long run. We've talked about if you have to get a model, you're going to have to pay a model, but I'd recommend, again, just using the ChatGPT because then you don't have to worry about releases or anything like that. I had Jessie, she signed me a full release. I did a contract with a lawyer. That was all extra money because I'm parading this girl's pictures all over the place. So that was all additional funding that in today's world you don't have to do because you can get photographs, make-believe photographs through ChatGPT. What we just spoke about. Use it now. It's free. It's definitely the way to go. Matter of fact, at some point I might redo mine and I'll probably use ChatGPT because I offer to send her money like every year. I usually buy her like a an Amazon gift card and I'll send it to her Christmas time, just because she did me such a solid. So I try to take care of her. Flyers, what are they going to cost you? Nothing. You can print them out on your computer, do them in color. Don't do black and white. keep them, don't fold them up and crunch them up in balls and throw them in the glove compartment. I keep them in a nice folder in each of my vehicles. So no matter what vehicle I'm using, I've got flyers with me. I've got the website on my cell phone. I've got my line at BS. I can just whip out the flyer and I can give it to somebody. So keep those in every vehicle. What's it cost you to print something? What, half a penny? But I know people in our business, and usually they are the retired cops that'll say, I'm not going to print out 50 of those. That costs money. Yes, it costs you a quarter. Okay. If you don't want to invest $9.99 a year and $2.99 a month in your business, then you probably shouldn't be in this business if you don't want to invest that kind of money back into your business. Always leave some time to rehearse. Try it on your kids, try it on your neighbors, try it on a stranger. I've done it where I've been out and nothing to do, and I run the story by a total stranger. I've got my identification, I've got my business card. That's all real. It's not bullshit. That's all real ID, real business card, fake story, and run it past somebody and see what they say, if they believe it. So what's the total investment? It probably runs me $25 a year to host the website, print the flyers. It's not a ton of money. If this saves you one time, and this is a gift that just keeps giving. I mean, you can hop on there anytime you want and just change the date. You can change the story. I mean, you can use this theoretically like forever. Okay, so with that, we're going to let me hop back for a second. I'm going to open it up to some questions and some discussion. Any questions you may have. The next slide here has my contact information. If you guys want to snap a picture of it with your phone, or write it down, whatever you'd like to do, or Claire can pass my info along. That's my cell phone. It's on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, as all of our phones should be. If you're a licensed private investigator, you only get work if you answer the phone. I know people, and again, I go through this in the coaching business. Pardon me. Their business model is, one of my best friends, somebody calls his business line. He allows it to go to voicemail. He listens to the message, he develops his response, and he calls the person back. By that time, they've already got a private investigator. So when my phone rings, I answer it day or night. That's the good business model. So if you call me and I don't answer the phone, it's because I'm speaking to a client, or I'm on a job that I can't take a phone call, or I'm doing a webinar such as this. I will get back to you. Feel free to call me day or night, preferably not at night, but give me a call during the day or dinner time. You want to chat about stuff. I love talking this stuff, PI stuff. This is my life. It's not a hobby. I do this 24/7. So I am all in this. So feel free to give me a call. If you have an idea or something you don't agree with, give me a call, bounce it off me. I don't know everything. I'm just telling you, this works for me. It may not work for everybody, but it works for me. And if somebody has a better way to build a mousetrap or a better mousetrap, I'm all ears, because anything I hear from people when they call me and ask me questions, I get as much from them as I give. I'll develop it into a future presentation on something so that everybody in our profession can benefit. This is truly a networking business that we're in, and it's a business that you should be networking and speaking with other investigators. The people I call most often and most frequently are PIs that are in my community, and you would think they're your competition. We all work well together. We all play nice in a sandbox. We give work to each other and we help each other out. This is not a business where you're going to say, it's my ball and I'm going home. You have to be able to communicate and talk to people to be successful in this business. When I say people, I'm not even talking clients. I'm talking about, our colleagues. So with that being said, questions or comments or anything I can expand upon, let's fire away and get into it.
Great, Jim. Thank you. That was amazing. The first question is actually from Resolve Investigations there. And Chris asks what happens when actually here, I lost your question, Chris. What happens when the police come up to you and they want to know what's going on, or
I can ask.
Go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
So Jim, how do you handle when law enforcement's called out on you? Because I've had this happen. That's why I asked. How do you handle it, when they come up to the window? Do you tell them why you're there? And then, after that, do you relocate to a different spot, or, do you consider yourself burned at that point and come back another day with another vehicle, or is it really just kind of situational?
Great question. So in a whole separate presentation, I do a presentation on what's called deconfliction. So in law enforcement, deconfliction is you take the bad guy's name, you throw him in today's computer system, and you make sure no one else is working a job or a case on that guy. In the PI world, deconfliction is you call the police department and you tell them that I'm out doing a surveillance. So I do not do a surveillance. If I'm going to put that car in park, and I have a whole block that I do in that, and I'd be more than glad to do that for you folks sometime, or even help you one-on-one. I have a block that I've developed that I call the local police department. I have a flyer made up that I fax or email to them. I tell them I'm in the neighborhood. This is what I'm driving. This is who I am. I am armed. I'm a retired police officer. I am carrying a weapon. This is what I'm doing. I don't give them the exact address. If I'm doing a surveillance on 123 Main Street, I'll give them the closest intersection. But the police know I'm there before or shortly after I get there. And I've had lots of instances where somebody's actually called the police on me as a suspicious vehicle, and I don't know they do. And the dispatcher or the communications operator will call me and say, "Hey, Jim, this is, Anytown USA Police Department. A neighbor just called on you. I have to send the police car by, so they don't think we're blowing off the call. And maybe I'll leave, maybe I'll stay there." But the key to that is they're not going to come up and stick a gun in your face, because our problem always is we don't know what happened in that neighborhood yesterday. We don't know if there's a string of burglaries going on in that neighborhood, or there was a sexual assault there last week. So I am a huge proponent of deconfliction. I would rather jeopardize a case than have somebody stick a gun in my face. So I always deconflict my case, and I strongly recommend that everyone does it when they're doing any sort of fixed surveillance. Now, that is a very, very polarizing point of view in our profession, because I'm sure if you went to a conference and you had 100 PIs, half the room would tell you they deconflict cases. The other half is going to tell you never. And I understand why people say never, because especially when you're dealing with local police departments, you never know who's sleeping with who. You never know who's working in the records division, or whose brother-in-law's sister's neighbors working the phones. You never know, but it's a chance you have to take. So I've had lots of instances where police come up to me. If they know you're there ahead of time, it's a dramatically different encounter than if they don't know you're there. So if they know that you're ahead of time, I've had them, I don't even leave, because my cover story, I tell the cops what I'm really doing. I don't lie to the cops. I say, look, I'm doing a surveillance on a house down the street, workers' comp, matrimonial. But if the neighbors know your cover story that we just went over, then it's acceptable. So I've had instances where I don't leave, Chris. Sometimes I just leave. Hey, you know what? It's too hot today. The cops have been here. Maybe I'll come back again. But the key to that is, the answer is deconflict the case before or immediately after you get there. Then you never have to worry about the cops rolling up on you and creating a situation that, God forbid, accidents happen, things go wrong. And when a police officer walks up to me, I'd like him or her to know I'm a PI long before they get to the car, and not after they have me proned out on the ground in handcuffs, rifling through my pockets, and then they find a PI identification. It's a much better ending the first way.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
That's good. So Jim, Chess asks, what kind of problems could arise from telling someone if they come up, my best friend keeps seeing her boyfriend's location keep coming around here, and I'm playing PI for her to see if I can find out why, and then show them some photos of him or the other person.
Okay. So think about this. Put it in your neighborhood. If you went up and tapped on the window, so now, granted, most of us are alpha personalities and we're suspicious by nature, but let's take our PI hats off. If I saw some guy sitting in my neighborhood, I went up, knocked on the door, and he says, I'm playing PI. I don't care. You can't play plumber. You can't play electrician. You're not playing PI in my neighborhood. I tell them to get out of the neighborhood, or I call the cops on them.
I wasn't
They're not
sure
professional. They're not legitimate. I'm sorry?
I wasn't sure if being kind of a younger female would help me in that situation compared to being a man. Just more believable.
I know. Forgive me. What is your first name?
Cheska. I go by Chess.
Chess, I know as many female PIs as I do male PIs. Females are much more believable. They're much more relatable. You can bullshit a lot better than a cop or a male. So you have an advantage of being a female. I would stick with the truth, because you can, if you lie, you're always going to have to continue that lie.
Yeah.
But if you just tell them the truth, you could say, hey, I'm going to be 8 hours today. If they have the money, they're probably going to pay me to come back tomorrow, and maybe one day next week. Now you're golden. They know who you are, why you're there. They got your flyer. How many times can you go back and say, I'm playing PI for a friend of mine? You know what? That wouldn't pass the smell test for me. If somebody came up in my neighborhood, I'd say, yeah, I don't, I would think I would be very questionable of that, but I would not be questionable if the guy or girl showed me their PI identification. Here's my business card. Keep my business card. Here's a flyer. Here's the website. By the way, if you ever need a private investigator, please give me a call. You're like investigator friendly. It's all legitimate. The only thing that's not legitimate is your cover story. The rest of it is all legitimate. You're not lying. You're going to know your story. You're going to know who you are. I've always found that is a better route than trying to come up with a lie or a story that then you're going to maybe not have that backstory, because somebody's going to say, well, who's your friend? And
Mhm.
what gives you the right to be a private investigator? Don't you have to be licensed in this state? How are you going to answer those questions? So I would stick with the truth, at least some of the truth, maybe not all the truth, but some of the truth. And I think you'll do better with that.
Awesome. I'm newer to it, so that was the first thing I started thinking about as a story. So I'm glad that I got into this webinar. Thank you.
Okay.
Jim, have you ever been in just a really small, tight-knit neighborhood? I'm thinking about my own neighborhood. There's probably 12 houses on the street. Everybody knows everybody else. So even, for your cover story, which is amazing, I could foresee there being some issues with, well, which house did you think you spotted this person at? I can go ask them for you, that kind of
Right.
thing.
But if you remember, the vagueness built into my story is she's missing from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm working for another private investigator as a subcontractor. I don't have all the information. The information was called in that somebody saw a girl look like this driving through the neighborhood on a bicycle. I always say driving through the neighborhood on a bicycle, opposed to at that house over there, because you don't know if they know the people at that house over there. So, and I throw in, look, I don't think this is going anywhere, but hey, it's really slow right now as a PI. And I took this job because they're paying me an hourly rate, and I'm here basically just putting the hours in. I don't think she's going to be in this neighborhood. There's no connection with this neighborhood. But if this family wants to pay me for 8 hours, hey, I could really use the money. And whether you got a million jobs or no jobs. And again, you build that vagueness in, you build that, hey, kind of passive, mopey kind of thing. People will start to believe that. To dovetail to your question as to how do you handle those really tight neighborhoods? I had one instance that comes to mind. It was a cohabitation where it was a matrimonial. Most people call it matrimonial. My client told me which neighbor was the neighborhood busybody. And I purposely parked in front of that person's house. And as soon as I saw the lights come on in the morning around 8 o'clock, I went up, knocked on the door. And I preemptively said, hi, Jim Nanos, private investigator. Here's my ID. Here's a business card. Here's a flyer. Before that person even knew I was there, I knocked on the door and I said, just want to let you know, I found a spot in front of your house. I'm going to be out here for a few hours. Here's what I'm doing. I don't want anybody to get upset or concerned. Here's all my information, and never had a problem with it. So I preemptively went to the busybody's house and knocked on the door.
That's great. And you don't ask. You don't say, hey, if it's okay with you, I'm going to park on your curb.
Well, I have done that also. I said, if you have a problem, I'll park someplace else. But nobody has a problem because everybody wants to help you find Jessica. Everybody wants to help because everyone can relate. If you put out the story, I want to, she drinks a little bit. I think she's got some issues with some medication. Not too sure. I don't have all the information because I don't deal directly with the parents. I'm going through the other PI whose case this is, so I don't have a lot of the information. And that's the vagueness. So it gives you sort of like that little workaround if you don't have the answers to everything.
That's great. Any other questions, last questions, guys? Now's the time. Feel free to just speak up or put them in the chat. We'll give you like one more minute before we cut it off. And while we're waiting for possible other questions, the one other thing that occurred to me, Jim, was what do you do when people call your tip line and they say, oh, I think how do you handle that?
And as I said earlier, it happens. So if I just don't want to deal with it, if I know I'm not going back to that case, if that case is done, it's over with, I just say, oh yeah, Jessica did return home. I just haven't taken the website down yet. I'm really sorry. Thank you for reminding me. And then I put that person's contact in my phone with a little code I have. So if they call me back, I just boot them to voicemail. I don't even talk to them again. So, like you're in my phone, it has, PI next to your name. Cause now so if it comes up, I know who you are. But for the newsy bodies or people to see Jessica, I've got a little code that begins with a J, and I know that's someone who I've given the flyer to, or probably someone I spoke to before. Or just answer, like, the easiest thing is, oh, Jesse came back home. If you're going back to the neighbor and say, oh, thank you very much, I'm going to have to call them. I might be out there next week again. Now they've invited you back to the neighborhood, to come do a surveillance.
Great. That's really good. Good tips there. All right. Well, I don't see any further questions coming through at the moment. Yeah, Jim, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Really, really informative and helpful. I think it'd be great to have you back again sometime and do the block on deconfliction and some of the other stuff you offer.
That's a
So
great
possibly
block to
we'll,
do, and it's something, and I feel so strongly about it, that I'm a very big proponent of that. So I'd love to do that at some point for you. And as I said earlier, you guys have my phone number. If you want to chat this up offline, or just feel free to give me a call. If you want to go back over different areas with help with it, just give me a call. If you need any mentoring or one-on-one training, go to thepicoach.com. I do all sorts of training and mentoring, from marketing to, what you should have on your website and what you should have on your business cards, and what works, or I think that will work best for most PIs.
great. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Thank you, Jim.
See you guys.